public health services.
And that brings to a close questions for oral answer today. I call on Government Order of the Day number 1.
Appropriation 2012-13 Estimates Bill. Adjourned debate on second reading and amendment proposed thereto.
The Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr Speaker, I rise to speak in favour of the budget delivered by the Honourable Bill English last Thursday, and as a consequence to speak against the amendment to that motion moved by Grant Robertson from the Labor Party. Mr Speaker, $360 million for teacher professional development, and Labor says no. $360 million to help teachers raise their professional standards so they can do a better job in the classroom, and Labor says no. Mr Speaker, the story that we've heard from the opposition, whether it's the Green Party, the New Zealand First Party or the Labor Party, since last week has consistently been no to the growth budget that National put in front of the country last week. Mr Speaker, it's extraordinary and quite unique in New Zealand's history that a government can put up a budget that frees up $4.4 billion of funding for new initiatives that will support frontline services throughout New Zealand that come from savings through various activities of government in areas that were, sir, to say the least, questionable in the first place. And I think, sir, the fact that there has been very little comment about where that money came from indicates how bad it had become over a long period of years, successive budgets, loading up different sorts of initiatives with no particular result for the taxpayer or for individual New Zealanders. So in a year where the government has delivered effectively a zero budget, it still has $4.4 billion worth of new spending initiatives in it. And, sir, the record so far from that approach previously has been 27,000 more elective operations being performed in New Zealand year on year and growing because of our new approach on getting better value from government services. 2,000 more nurses, 800 more doctors, 1,000 fewer back office positions in the Health Ministry. Mr Speaker, those are good numbers and they do represent progress in society. 600 more police on the beat. No wonder, sir, that the incidence of offending is starting to fall and that we are seeing some of the benefits from an intensive program the police have had in crime reduction. Mr Speaker, national standards in reading, in writing and mathematics to raise achievements in schools will see great dividends for this country in the future. And it underlines, sir, the support of those policies underlines the need that the Minister Hekia Parata has identified so well to get quality into teaching and therefore, sir, the need to support teachers in their work. And so, as I say again, $360 million in this budget for professional development, and our opponents say no. 3,500 more early childhood places as a result of this budget. 48,000 run-down state houses will be upgraded as a result of this budget. We get from the other side constantly all sorts of stories about the conditions that people have to live in various parts of the country. All sorts of stories about living in squalor, living in poverty, etc., etc. We are going to fix 48,000 state houses this year, which is just a continuation of what's been going on year after year under this government, and Labor says, no, that's not a good idea. Mr Speaker, 12,000 more tertiary education places. That, sir, is equivalent to a whole new university full of students developed over the last 3 years and funded into the next 4 years by the current government. That, sir, is a commitment to raising the educational profile of the entire New Zealand population. Mr Speaker, then it comes to the Labor Party's complete denial of the huge difficulty that the Christchurch earthquake places in front of not only people in that city, sir, but throughout this country because of the type of nation we are, where we all like to support one another. It is a big commitment to take $5.5 billion, put it aside and say we'll be spending that over the next X number of years, plus all sorts of other expenditures that are likely to grow over that time, and to make that absolute commitment that we are there right to the end. And what did Labor do? Well, Labor come out and say, firstly, there was a question last week suggesting that we hadn't actually spent that. Utter rubbish, Mr Speaker. And those people who've received their red zone settlements, those people who can see the Stronger Christchurch network, infrastructure rebuild team working, they know that that money's being spent, sir. And throughout the city and the greater Christchurch area, there is massive evidence of the activity that will lead to recovery. And what does Labor say? We've got the wrong structure in place. We should have had an SOE running it, according to their spokesman. Well, sir, the SOE generally has a capacity to earn its own revenue. There is no capacity, sir, for the government to earn revenue out of this particular exercise. Then there was a suggestion it should be a Crown entity of some sort. Well, that would require a committee of the great and good appointed by the Labor Party to somehow superintend activities between the people who need the attention, the minister who's responsible for the money. And that, sir, I think would lead to a degree of tension and controversy that people in Christchurch at the moment simply do not need. Mr Speaker, the government stands alongside people in Christchurch, and on the 27th of July, another milestone will be achieved when the government is able to finally approve the redevelopment program for the CBD. Mr Speaker, that will be a day where we see a lot of people make big commitments, or begin to make big commitments to that rebuild of Christchurch. Mr Speaker, the other thing that is surprising in this budget is the apparent lack of worry from the other side of the House about New Zealand's financial situation, and absolutely no recognition that there is, throughout the world, a crisis going on. New Zealand's economy is 1% of the world's economy. We're like a little leaf, sir, on a large, tumultuous ocean that's being battered by a hurricane. And we are keeping our head up, sir, as a nation, no question about that, in quite a remarkable way. But for there to be a denial that the turmoil in the rest of the world's economic activity is somehow not going to affect New Zealand is, I think, sir, an abdication of any chance of ever leading this country to any sort of economic better position. We, sir, on the other hand, have recognised that there was a necessity to nurse New Zealand through those worst years. From the end of 2007 right through 2008, we were in recession, no question about that. The previous government did not recognise that in the 2008 budget. Sir, we have kept the worst effects of what could have been a very disastrous economic downturn for New Zealand at bay by responsibly engaging in government activity that's maintained our economic activity. But there's a time when simply there is a necessity to recognise how costly that is, and to get it back to some sort of surplus position, and to start reducing debt. And that, sir, is what Mr English has done in this budget, and he should be congratulated for that. To suggest, as Mr Robertson did when he moved the amendment to the motion, I'm sorry? I was sure it was Mr Robertson, but I could be wrong on that. It really doesn't matter. What the Labor Party have said is that they don't support that concept. They don't support the idea of having a balanced budget. They don't support the idea of making sure that you do create, sir, an opportunity for new initiatives to occur in your economy by shifting around the money the government currently spends to ensure it's in places where it matters. And, sir, they have no concept of the need to reduce debt as a nation. Those things, sir, indicate that this is an opposition that has no intention of being a government, and is quite contented to sit around criticising everything that everyone else does, and having a single answer in response to any initiative that a government puts up. That single answer, that single response is always no. Sir, Mr Speaker, I predict that that will be the answer that voters give this crowd next time they get the opportunity. No.
That was worth all 2 seconds.
Speaker.
I call the Honourable David